Welcome to Chymick Gaming. I'm your host, Chymick, and this is my second deep dive into the ocean of lore surrounding the Legend of Zelda. As many of you may already suspect, I love diving into the use of symbolism and other cultural parallels between game lore and real-world art and history. Before we set sail, I want to say thank you for all the support for my first Zelda lore video. I was surprised and flattered by all the positive feedback and constructive criticism on my first effort. It took a fair amount of work, and I'm very happy to know that the effort paid off in the form of a video you all enjoyed watching. That feedback has inspired me to focus on providing even better deep dive videos in the future, and given me a sense of direction for my channel. So thank you all, from the bottom of my heart. Also, a special thank you to Zelda Theory and Hyrule Gamer for giving me permission to share a link for my first lore video in the comments of their recent review of fan theories. They are great Zelda theorists. You should go check them out. And a final thank you to Zelda Chick for offering some great feedback on that first deep dive in light of her own excellent research along a similar theme. Links to all these great theorists and the videos mentioned are in the description below. Now, let's get to the bottom of the newest mystery uncovered during our last treasure hunt. Shine your iron boots and strap on your Zora armor, because we are headed out for dark waters and another deep dive. This video will be a Tears of the Kingdom theory. While I was researching the recurrence of the Magatama, spiral, swirl motif in the Legend's timeline, I had a hunch about the Master Sword in Breath of the Wild. I followed my hunch and captured some video of it breaking during combat. Slowing down the footage revealed this treasure, the swirling spiral at the heart of our last mystery. If you missed the last dive, one of the conclusions I made during that investigation was that this swirl or spiral motif has a major spiritual significance for all the various cultures of Hyrule. In theory, it could represent some sort of sacred jewel, or could be a reference to one of the three sacred treasures of Hylia, along with a sword and mirror. Whether we all agree about Hylia's three sacred treasures, it's fair to say that this symbol of the spiral swirl, and all of its various cultural and historical permutations, represents a type of divine power in the legend, and in some way is deeply connected to the upcoming entry in the saga, Tears of the Kingdom. As one viewer pointed out, sometimes a spiral or swirl worked into a game element can just be decorative. The shields of the Gerudo in Breath of the Wild are likely just a fancy kind of gold filigree to elevate the visual aesthetic, and I will admit, after all the Where's Waldo type research that I did for the last video, I was seeing swirls and spirals everywhere, even when I closed my eyes. But even after a short break to rid myself of spiral vision, I could not get one particular spiral out of my head, that of the Shattering Master Sword. Warning up front, this will be a cold water dive. Prepare for the shivers. Why does the Master Sword break like this? Why does warping to Sheikah platforms dissolve Link into a cluster of the same blue spiral energy? Yeah, that hunch paid off too, though you'll come to understand why I wish it hadn't. While we sail to the dive spot, why don't we take another look at the ancient tapestry from Breath of the Wild, notably the story and the framework around the Great Calamity battle. When I found our familiar spiral symbol here, it caught my newly trained eye. Impa tells us the story in the center of the tapestry, but the story that literally frames this legendary battle is mostly left out of her retelling. This backstory was deliberately recorded. It has been preserved in the form of all the imagery and symbolism surrounding the central image. The story was important enough to put it into the context of the epic battle and remembered as part of that legend, at least remembered by the Sheikah. Impa also shows us how to read this hidden story by starting in the top left when she begins her own tale of the Great Calamity. This is our treasure map. Forget about finding the X. The spiral marks the spot. Before we begin the story, I do want to point out a major consideration regarding the Sheikah alphabet. I feel like their alphabet is important to point out since this is one of their stories, preserved by their culture, and chronicled in their language, symbols, and iconography. The first letter, or glyph, of the Sheikah alphabet is a large single spiral. It's the first letter. The last letter of their alphabet is a union of two spirals, at least if you see the same connection to the Magatama and Tomoe symbol that I do. This symbol is a foundational concept to many cultural groups across Hyrule, but most especially to the Sheikah. They can't hide their connection to this symbol. It's a primal part of who they are and how they think. And from what we see next of this spiral motif in the tapestry story, we may have an answer as to what it represents at its deepest level. As we see in the top line, There's a tranquil mountainside village of people at work in the fields near a forest. This leads me to believe that this is Karako Village, or some earlier incarnation of the same place from this ancient era in the legend. A simple place, but peaceful. I also believe that these people are ancient Sheikah, the head shape representing their traditional hats, the Toriogasa, which is most commonly seen in the real world during the Awa Dance Festival. The Awa Dance Festival grew out of an older tradition called the Bon Odori, a dance said to welcome the spirits of the dead for the subsequent Bon Festival, when 5 fires are lit to signify the moment that the spirits of the dead return to the shrines and altars of their ancestral homes. We also see that same Toriogasa on the Sheikah of Karako Village, who have adopted a simpler and more agrarian way of life, despite their knowledge of ancient technologies. I believe the simplified eye depicted in the tapestry is meant to represent a simpler form of Sheikah culture. The shape of the heads, including the eyes on the other characters in the tapestry, show just enough attention to form and proportion to conclude that the rendering is more than just a primitive design for Hylian or any other major race. The villager eye in particular is too large, though I admit that the eye does not have the other features typically associated with the Sheikah. It's missing the 3 triangles along the top, and of course the iconic teardrop coming from the bottom. Regardless, this tapestry is embroidered with the Sheikah language and is adorned with their symbols and designs. It's logical to assume that the story is told from the perspective of their people and is meant for their people as a lesson from the past. On the other side of the castle, we were given a different depiction of what are clearly ancient Sheikah scientists, this time at work with their ancient technology. The direction of the action here is made clear from the increasing size of the machinery and a little knowledge of the scientific process. The first 2 Sheikah figures are seated on the ground near some simple swirling pattern, which seems to be buried in the earth. If this depicts a scientific process, that would mean they are observing something that is naturally occurring and drawing some conclusion from their observations of it. Whatever they have extracted from this natural phenomenon is then lifted up and revealed to be the spiral symbol, the first and last letter of their alphabet, that very foundational concept embedded within their very language. Essentially, it's something very important, something powerful. As I stared at this image, I saw the story of the Sheikah using the primal force they discovered and converting it into the energy they needed to power their technology. As the conduits of converted power continue to expand, so do the advances in Sheikah tech. The foundations for the future had been laid, and the project grew. Eventually, it created some final product, some radiant treasure. This is all done while the king looks on under armed guard. The guards seem to be present to indicate a military purpose to the final product of the Sheikah technology. They may also be present to deal with the rabble, those same simple villagers from before, now raising their arms and begging on their knees. The words popped in my head suddenly while I stared at this scene. Please, Your Majesty, don't do this. The simpler, more spiritual Sheikah have no tears on their eye because they aren't part of this sadness. There are no triangles because they are not interested in obtaining the Triforce. They are begging the king to stop this other group of Sheikah, who are interested in the Triforce and are causing these tears to manifest. But the king doesn't heed the dire warning from a simple people. He just stares straight ahead. His objective is clear, and his course is set. There is a terrible battle on the horizon. He must be prepared. After the battle, something changes. There's nothing to indicate what changes the king's mind, but the same villagers who begged the king to stop are now rallied behind him. The king directs his soldiers to deal with the Sheikah scientists. Those scientists are driven into a split. They flee, and either return to the goddess Hylia, or they turn their mask upside down and become Yiga, driven into a pit and out of this particular story of the Sheikah people. Now all the Sheikah share in the same terrible sadness caused by the scientist, and likewise, all bear the mark of the tear. The split between the Sheikah and the Yiga clans is not contested, and has been covered before by other great Zelda theorists. It's also well supported by the story and gameplay of Breath of the Wild. I understand that the Sheikah symbol in-game has almost always been depicted with the tear throughout the Zelda timeline. It's part of their symbol throughout the ages. However, I think as it relates to an ancient story told from a Sheikah perspective, the use of a large eye on a specific group of characters is meant to symbolically represent different factions of the same clan, rather than some unknown group. This is their history and their legend. The divide between a simpler Sheikah way of life and one that is technologically advanced is also reflected by Impa and Pura. Impa wears the same hat as the Sheikah monks, what appears to be modeled after a type of kasa, specifically the Suge kasa, which is often seen as a symbol of Buddhism throughout the real world. We have arrived at the dive location. Let's hit the water and head down. When looking further into the symbolism of the spiral motif, I came across an idea that overlaps with my theory of the Magatama and its relationship to a divine life-sustaining power. The other reference I found was to the Xiangyun, the auspicious clouds, from Chinese culture, which are often associated with prosperity and good fortune. Just as the Magatama can represent divine prosperity and good fortune, so does the spiral design in the Xiangyun. When it is depicted as 5 colored clouds, they are seen as a very good sign, possibly even the will of heaven. The symbol may have its roots in the life-giving rain that sustained early agrarian societies, but has taken on a deeper meaning over the millennia since its first use. From this design, there are variations, just as the Tomoe is likely a 2-dimensional variation of the Magatama. Elements of the Xiangyun can be found in the Yun wind pattern, which is also said to signify life-giving rain. In the case for the sacred Magatama, I made a connection between the spiral design in the Legend of Zelda and a sacred jewel that represented a life-sustaining divine power. Now we have another connection between the spiral symbol and life-sustaining rain. What if for the Legend of Zelda, the spiral has an even simpler, more primal meaning? What if the various cultures of Hyrule who all use this spiral symbol, the core concept of the Sheikah's own language, all interpret and use this symbol to represent life? Or to be slightly more specific, the essence of life. In a lot of various real-world religious and spiritual traditions, there's no real distinction between the energy of one's spirit, which we will call mana, and the power of one's soul. The Sheikah scientists observed a natural phenomenon and found a way to convert that into a type of energy they can use to power their technology, from creating an ancient database, to animating and programming mechanical constructs, to powering a shrine of resurrection. The sort of energy being channeled here is not electricity. This is a life-sustaining, a life-giving power. This is something that can approximate divine power. This is, for lack of a better phrase, the sacred power of the mortal soul. In the ancient Sheikah tapestry, this mana was harvested by the ancient Sheikah scientists as a form of energy to power their machines, and the process was opposed by the more religious sects of the Sheikah, for obvious reasons. However, the decision to proceed was supported by a king who wanted to finally end the scourge of eternal malice that plagued his kingdom and imminently threatened the life of his daughter. Consider this. If the technology was so successful in helping defeat the first emergence of Calamity Ganon, then why was it not just abandoned, but buried deep underground? It took 10,000 years to unearth it, barely in time for the second emergence. Were the dark secrets of its true cost to Hyrule only revealed after the battle had been won? How much mana does it take to ensure 10,000 years of peace in the land of Hyrule? And more importantly, how does all this connect to the Master Sword from Breath of the Wild being a fake? Congratulations on making it this far down into this chilling mystery. If you're ready to finish the dive, head on down to part 2 and have your shovel ready to uncover the secrets of the Sheikah and the fate of Hyrule. If you need a quick break, consider subscribing to the channel to make it easy to find your way back. And as always, thank you for watching.